Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Unleashed with Carrie. I am super excited for today. I have with us Bryce McKinley. Bryce is a guy I sort of connected with at this event I talk about all the time, Thrive. Changed my life, changed just about everybody's life I know who was involved in it. And I'm really honored that Bryce is here today. My introduction cannot do him justice, but just to give you a touch of what he's about, he is an international speaker, a business coach, and a real estate consultant. And he's a dad. He does all of this on top of being a dad and really seems to attribute a lot of his success to his son. Not to mention his son is doing amazing things and has his own business and is really doing awesome in that venue as well. So I'm sure we'll get into that. So Bryce, thanks for being here.
Hey, it's my honor, Carrie. I appreciate you, lady. I love your energy and I'm all about that, right? We exchange money for things and that's usually energy, but we also exchange time for energy and energy for energy to refill each other. And so I'm super honored to be here today. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm honored as well. And energy, that's something I'm working on. I tend to be up here in energy, and sometimes I feel like I need to bring it back down.
No,
Yeah.
never compromise who you are for someone else's justification of their feelings. So don't do that.
That's true. That's true. I definitely should not change who I am, but sometimes I think maybe I need to alter the way I'm presenting myself from time to time.
Okay.
But still staying true to me, I guess.
Sure.
So I want to ask you right off the bat, you wrote in your bio to me that you started selling when you were 8 years old.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about that?
Oh, goodness. At 8 years old, I'll never forget, I wanted to help my family make money. My parents weren't doing very well financially. Hell, in modern society, I think that they're middle to lower class still to this day. They refuse to quit their day job. And my dad was working 3 or 4 jobs. At that point, I'm in third, fourth grade, right? And my mom was a stay-at-home mom up until my age of approximately 8. She went to work in a factory. She still works in the same factory 30 years later to this day. And I felt like I wanted to contribute. And so I got a paper out. And in Northern Illinois, I don't know if you guys remember this, but they used to have these little tear-off tags. That was how you gave a receipt for the newspaper. And so you would sell the newspaper, you would knock on doors in between your route if you wanted to create more income, and you would sell them on the idea of subscribing to the newspaper. And then every 2 weeks you'd go around collecting, and you would get the little tab and you'd tear it off. This is your receipt. You paid for this week through this week, and you collect the money. And then at the end of that biweekly period, you'd meet with your route manager and exchange the money that you owed for your papers, and you'd keep the difference. However, as times progressed, being more efficient, they found that they could create a subscription model way back then, right? And if they did that, well, then they could have more efficiency, right? They could have larger profits. And so they would encourage us kids to get people to pay in the office. I was the only person at this particular newspaper or route manager, deliver, paper boy, however you want to call it, that had every one of my clients paying in office within 2 weeks. Every single one of them. If I had to guess, I'd say I probably had 200-300 papers I was delivering at 8 years old. So that's a pretty big deal. I was making at that point more money than my parents were, and they were working 40-hour work weeks because of the profit margins and so forth. I ended up getting a second and third paper route. Well, you had to be 10 to have a route. And for those of you that have not met me, I'm 6'5" and like 245, 50 pounds, depending on what day it is. I'm a big guy, and I've always been larger in stature. And so this was no different. They just assumed that I was older than I was, put me in a route. We'll do the paperwork later. And then Karen shows up at my door, right? I'll never forget Karen. She shows up and we need to talk, and we sit down, and I didn't know this meeting was happening. My parents called me in, and basically they were going to let me go. And my natural God-given abilities to just hustle kicked in. And when they were about to get up, I said, wait a minute, I got an idea. What if we put the route in my dad's name? And if I do a good job, when I turn 10, give me 2 or 3 more routes. Needless to say, they all agreed that would be a great idea since I was doing such a great job. And within like 9 months, I still hadn't hit 9 years old at this point. I was, still 8 or 9 years old. I hadn't hit 10, I'm sorry. And I had 5 routes making great money for 1987 or 88, whatever that was, right? And I'm making 300-400 bucks a week delivering newspapers and selling the subscription model that they had wanted us to do. So several awards. I remember getting a signed autographed baseball and so forth. So I've just always been, at heart, this entrepreneur and salesperson, right? It's always just came natural and fun to me. So I got fired and for the first and last time and pitched them to convince them to let me stay on with them as long as it was in my dad's name. So 1099 myself to my dad, I guess. I don't know.
So it was all about how you were going to make it work.
Yeah.
And just from the little bit I know about you and your story so far, it seems like that's just a theme. You make it work.
Yeah.
You're going to figure it out. That's amazing that you have that within you. We need to figure out how to pass that on and get more people feeling that way and looking at the house.
Yeah.
So you had this paper out. What was school and young life for you? I mean, I can't imagine if you're making more money than your parents, that had to be an interesting relationship going on.
It really was because my parents weren't educated. And so they didn't teach me money management. Right. So I'm buying new bikes and toys for the kids on the block. I'm every Sunday after church, I'm offering to go, buy lunch because we wanted to eat it. I wanted to eat at Ponderosa. I'm a fat kid that loves cake, right? Like I wanted to go to the buffet at Ponderosa, if you know what Ponderosa is, right? It's not even in business anymore, but I loved that restaurant because for us, that was a treat. And so just kind of, squandering those monies away and slowly saving up. I put a lot of money into like baseball card collections as a kid. But it really comes down to looking at the events in our lives, right? Like if there's a shadow in your life, there's a light casting it somewhere. And if you can get in that mentality, then you can eventually find the light. It's just a matter of moving in and around that obstacle. And so it wasn't all gravy for me. I mean, school came really easy for me. To answer your question, between kindergarten and 4th grade, I was in honors. I went through an exchange program and I've been to Austria, New Zealand as an elementary student exchange because I had an exceptional grades and advanced classes and all of these, accelerated classes that they had at the time. And then I had tragedies occur. My parents ended up going through a nasty divorce when I hit 11, 12 years old, and being raised in a very religious cult that I was, cult-like mentality at this organized religious group that we were a part of. That was just really challenging for my brother and I, even, because we had this one concept of how life is and how spirituality is. And then life hits. And so at about age 11, 12, parents are going through this divorce and I lost all interest in school. One, it was just way too easy. And two, I really just didn't give a darn. I didn't care. I was making money. I've got 5 or 6 paper routes at this time and I'm hustling, and all this world stuff comes to a crashing halt. And I'm an adolescent boy going through puberty, right? Like I didn't know how the hell to deal with it. My parents didn't have great parenting skills to help me cope with it. And so, it really became really challenging to stay focused. I was hanging out with the wrong crowd. I was doing things that most people would never dream of doing at 12, 13, 14 years old. It's crazy thinking about it as a successful contributing member of society, looking back on that period of my life, like, holy cow, what the hell was I thinking? but I really wasn't. I didn't know. So school for me, the first elementary years was super gravy, super easy. Then it became more challenging because of the fact that I wanted to fulfill the dreams of my parents and graduate, but I just didn't care. And so I started slacking and just barely scraping by with, D's and C's and a few F's, barely graduating into out of middle school, going into high school. And then things just got worse at that point, hanging out with the wrong crowd. I got rid of my paper routes and went to work for a girl I was dating in high school. Her dad had a company, and for a couple of years I was working with him and hanging out with the wrong crowd. I was, selling drugs and hanging out with gangs in Illinois, and they're very prevalent in Illinois. School just wasn't anything that I really cared about. I didn't care about learning what they had to teach because I knew that I was never going to go and be a doctor or a lawyer or someone that needed some sort of license to do anything. That wasn't my dream. I wanted to own my own thing. I wanted to have my own empire and be in charge of something. And I didn't see that school was going to help me get there, business school or not. I already had all that, I felt. So
That's amazing that you knew that early on. I started a school, like a little side hobby school when I was a kid, but I had no idea I was going to be doing my own thing. It just wasn't part of my reality as a possibility. How did you know that you were going to do your own thing? Like, how was that put into your head?
it's interesting that you ask it that way. And I'm glad that you did, because I didn't know then. Looking back now as a successful entrepreneur, I see those traits like, oh, that's what I was doing. That constant fight or flight. I was fighting for success because my parents were working jobs that they hated. They were miserable. They still are, to a certain degree. I didn't want that. My dream was I would always go downtown Chicago and look at the skyline and be like, that's going to be my office one day. That was my goal. That was all I knew. I would have an office up there in that building. And it was a particular building that we're all familiar with. And so that was it, right? Like that was my goal setting. And so I just hustled to do whatever it took to get there. And so looking at my high school years, I was expelled my freshman year. I had gotten into a nasty fight that involved some knives and lots of blood, and I was expelled. I barely scraped through high school. Like my senior year, put it this way, I played football in high school and varsity all 4 years. And because of that and the wrong crowd, I just didn't give a crap about what I was supposed to be doing. I didn't go meet with my counselors to get to classes. I just let them sign me up for whatever they signed me up for and put me in classes. Come to find out, my senior year, I ended up having to have 4 English classes because I had failed the other 3. And the reason for that was because the way the schedule was, it was like, well, I had co-op because they did block scheduling. So the second half of the day I was going to work, which was a joke. And prior to that, I had study hall, and prior to that, I had PE. So I didn't have to go to PE or study hall because I was in athletics. So I'd just skip the rest of the day. I'd skip PE, I'd skip study hall, I would skip language arts, and then I'd leave for my co-op class and show up to class once every, the semester at the beginning of the semester, right? It didn't matter to me. So my senior year, I had to take 4 English classes. I'll never forget that. And, I'll never forget Mr. Golby. This was an English teacher. He was a freshman English teacher. I'm a senior in a room full of freshmen. And here's this teacher that really just inspired me. I don't remember what the poem was, but he reenacted a poem and literally jumped out of the window enacting this, like scene out. I had gotten smart ass with him one day, and he did a drop kick because apparently the guy was in martial arts, did a drop kick like inches from my face. And I'm like, oh shit, this is somebody I probably shouldn't mess with. Right. And then from there, he broke things down so simplistically that I got it. And I'll never forget that this light bulb going off. And I looked forward to going to his class. And, I was the kid. I was one of the most popular kids. I hung out with the dirtballs, the homeless kids, the rich kids, the band kids. I hung out with everybody, got along with everybody. And it was really cool because my senior graduating class barely scraped by, like literally this much credits needed to graduate, and they let me take it after. They let me walk with my class, and I was the only one in my graduating class. It's probably one of my favorite moments and memories that I have in life. I was the only one in my graduating class that got a standing ovation at the ceremony when I walked. It was pretty cool. It was pretty cool.
Wow. So do you think that teacher was partially responsible for pushing you forward?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It just gave me a different perspective. And I'll never forget, that was the moment I went home and I started journaling because I had to do it for that class. And I'll never forget that journal entry. There's always another explanation. And I get emotional thinking about it because that line has helped me through so much. There's always another explanation in my personal relationships, my professional relationships, in arguments and debates and negotiations. There's always another perspective. And sorry for getting emotional. I didn't think we were going to talk about something like this, but literally having that thought and writing that down, that was the day that my life would forever be changed, and I would look at things more positively. And so when I went into the class the next day, I remember sharing that, and he told me there's always another explanation. It may not be what you like. However, if you think of things that way, or as if there's another side of the coin, you have a better outcome. You have a better perspective on what may be possible. And so that was just kind of the driving force behind that inspiration. And it's helped me in so many ways. Hell, I use that same line in coaching relationships and in my academy, right? And when there's struggling relationships between business partners or spouses, like you can live life as if there's always another explanation. Maybe you don't know that somebody got fired that your spouse was working really close with, that they really appreciated. They had a really bad day and they come home and they're short with you, and then you snap off of them because you had a bad day. Like, there's another explanation. Find what that is and ask better questions. And when you do that, now we have a better, well-formed understanding of where each other is, right?
How can you convince someone who's perhaps skeptical of that idea or that attitude, mindset, whatever you want to call it, especially a young person who, like you, is probably feeling like school is pretty irrelevant. They don't get why they're learning what they're learning, and they want something different, or maybe they don't even know what they want, but they're still in that, what I would call that eye roll phase, that skeptical phase of like, well, why should I listen to your words of wisdom or some other influencer's word of wisdom? Do you have any ways to get to them?
That's a great question. And I would say it's also a general question at the same time. Like, it's gonna come as a case by case basis. However, I know that I believe in you. And if I believe in you, then you should probably believe in yourself. And here's why. If I can come from the inner city, one of the worst housing projects in the country, have little to no opportunities because my parents are first generation, like immigrants, and there's 100,000 million other people that have come to this country, and you live in America. If you're watching this and you're in an American, like, you have no excuse. You have literally no excuse as to why you cannot be successful or be everything that you dreamed of being. Not only have I come from little to nothing, but I amassed hundreds of millions of dollars. I had tragedy after tragedy after tragedy, and we can talk about that if you'd like. But I mean, you have your son get killed, you have your wife get killed, you have 5 businesses go down the drain, and every penny after earning millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, down to zero. Literally $32 to my name, September 28, 2011. And I seen the light. I realized, oh, there's the light behind the obstacle. right? Behind that shadow being cast, there's the light. And I found another opportunity. I found that other explanation as to why I've been going through this. And so, every situation is going to be different out there. It's going to be more overwhelming for some than it will be others. However, that doesn't mean, I'm pretty black and white. I'll just put it like this. You're not the only one. And that may hurt, but if you're going through some shit right now, excuse my language, if I don't know your audience,
Oh, it's fine.
if you're going through some things right now, like, you're not the only one. Hell, I just had somebody today, like, had to completely abort a project that they were working on for their family with, an embryo and trying to do like a refertilization. I don't even know what the heck it's called, but it's the end of the world for them. It's like, there's people actually losing babies today. This is not as bad as other people, but for that individual, it's an amazing, tragic event. That doesn't mean that it's any less tragic just because it's not as tragic for someone else. However, just because it's more tragic for you doesn't mean it's the end of the world, because someone else may have it worse, right? And so it's just, that's where that other explanation can really be looked at a little bit more effectively. Like, you're going through some things. However, you can't sit there and expect things to change. What's the old saying, right? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting nothing, or expecting a change, and seeing no results. Like, you can't keep doing the same thing, expect different results, and sit there and stew in it. Now, you could, however, you can't point the finger at anybody else but your own self. And when you start accepting responsibility for your own actions, then you start to see a different, well-formed outcome, and you start to see a different light at the end of the tunnel. So for somebody that's going through some things that may not see why school is important, I mean, I can't really justify it. I'd say go read the book, Think and Grow Rich. Finish school just because it's an opportunity to check it off a list. But, I may not be the best person to ask this, Carrie, because I don't think that the modern day school system does much for our kids. I really don't.
I'm 100% with you there.
I'm not going to tell anybody to quit, though. I'll tell you that.
And I agree, because we live in a culture where our success, for the most part, is governed by having that high school diploma. Even if you're not applying any of those skills, a lot of the time you still need it. Certainly not 100% of the time. There are so many other ways, and that's what I'm trying to show here, that whether you go to school or whether you don't go to school or drop out or whatever, there are other ways.
Yeah, it's definitely not the end of the world. Like, if you drop out, don't go and think that it's the end of the world, right? Like, don't just shoot yourself in the foot and say, screw it, I'm going to go work a 9 to 5 in the factory, or a 12 to 12, whatever. Like, it's not the end of the world. That's going to be the easiest job to get. However, that's not going to be the most successful job that you could get if you applied yourself. I've already mentioned one book. Another book is the book Expert Secrets. Like, you're good at something. If you're good at skateboarding, read this book, Expert Secrets. That book will show you how to write a course and go sell that course online for $50 a month for six months, and you get 100 people. Guess what? You're making a couple grand a month doing nothing. You record content one time, you put it out there once, and then you just sign people up, right? But make sure that you're adding value to someone. You can't expect somebody to exchange their money for your energy if you're not providing value. So really find something. I mean, heck, I could show you how to write a course if you're a secretary, as long as you have value, right? Like, if you're a damn good secretary, you could stop being a secretary today and write a course and be an entrepreneur and sell that. Like, be your own school, create your own university.
Absolutely. We can write books about anything. We can do courses. We can have, online programs. It's just, everything's there. But like you said, adding value, and also don't fall victim to build it, but then leave out the selling part.
Yeah.
No, if nothing's going to happen if you just make a program or make a book and put up a website and cross your fingers. Like, you have to do the work to make the people come to you, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
But so you are clearly a very driven person. and you seem to talk like this is really built from within you. What habits, routines do you have? I know you have a killer morning routine that you use, which you can either go into detail or just talk about it generally, but like, what keeps you going? How do you find that drive? And then maybe when it's lacking, how do you build it back up again?
Mm. Well, I mean, if we talk about I mean, everybody's got a routine of some sort, right? Like whether you just wake up and you go to the bathroom, you throw some water in your face, or you wake up and you brush your teeth, you go to the bathroom, then wash your hands. Like everybody's got some sort of routine. The difference is are you willing to do what others won't so you can have what others want? Right? You got to be willing to do what others won't do so that you can have what others want to. And so what I mean by that, for example, my 8-year-old son and I, every morning we're up at 4:45. No matter if I go to sleep at 1 a.m. or 9 p.m., we're up at 4:45. We lay there and we meditate. At 5 o'clock, our feet hits the ground. We make our bed. Between 5:20 and 7:20, we go through affirmations and meditation and gratitude and devotion and meditation. And we go through this series of event and visualizations, right? Like through this series of events to get our mind right. And the whole time we're focusing on our well-formed outcome. Our outcome is that we will have this, we will do this, and we will be that. And those things are going to be different for everybody. But for me, I don't need a 100,000 square foot mansion. I just don't need that. I've had that. That's a hell of a lot of maintenance. I don't want that. But for me, the 12,000 square foot house that I'm in now, like I'm good with that. There's 3 people in my house. I've got way more room than I need, but if I have friends or family over, it feels great to fill up the house, and it's more than enough, right? The vacations that I want to have with my friends and my family, I sit there and I dream about it every morning in a state of meditation and visualize through visualizations, what that water smells like, tastes like, feels like when I'm diving off a high dive into the Filipino islands, right? Like, or the Vietnamese islands, or, the Cozumel deep dive canyons, right? Like all of these places that I currently own property in all over the world. But 8 years ago, I was sleeping in my car. So if I can manifest that through visualizing it, so can you. And so that would be the first step, getting very clear on what it is that you want and just start being what that person is that has that. So if that means waking up at 5 a.m. and you want that mansion, you want that nice car, you want that nice suit every day, like you got to be able to do what those types of people do. And that's, they get up, they brush their teeth, they go through these routines, they work out. I mean, you have to be able to do what others want to have what others want. And so that's where I would first start. Secondly, everybody's like, find your why, find your why. I think that's bullshit. I really do. Like, you can find your why, and then in 5 minutes, your why is going to change, because God forbid the worst happens. If your why is because you want to provide a better life for your family, your family gets wiped out, you just lost your why. I've had that happen before, right? If your why is because you don't want to, you want to, so for example, for me, when I was going through that, what is my why? I want to be what I wish that I had. That's my why. My why is I want to be what I wish that I had, which is an amazing leader. I didn't have leaders in my life. I want to inform and instruct in every capacity of what knowledge I have. But more importantly, it's the how. It's not the why that will drive you, it's the how. And if you can break that down, if I want to be what I wish that I had, how am I going to do that? Well, I just be. I show up, and I'm a damn good leader. I'm a damn good motivator, and I'm a damn good lover, whether that's personally or spiritually or intimately. Like, I show up. I love people. I provide value, and that's what I wish that I had. So my why is being fulfilled with my how.
I love that. And hearing that is music to my ears, because I'm someone who's kind of struggling with finding my why. And I keep going back to like, do I really do I really need to? I know what I'm good at. I know what I love to do. I don't necessarily know the why behind it, but I know I love to help people, and I'm kind of good with that.
You need to go
Um,
get a Sharpen hat so that way when it's backwards and you go live, it shows up forward. Because Sharpen is all of us that are selflessly helping already persons eager for nurturing.
I was just gonna say, tell us about that, because I know your time is short, and you even said early on when you had money as a kid and you were buying like stuff for kids in the neighborhood, you've got the biggest heart of anyone I've ever talked to. And
Oh, thank you.
yeah, tell us what Sharpen is.
Yeah, so Sharpen is a non-for-profit that it's a group of men. We meet every Saturday morning, and I am AKA Coach Sharpen. So you can find me on Instagram at Coach Sharpen. But Sharpen for me is just like the scripture where iron sharpens iron, so does one another to his brother. So how do we help each other out? Like, you have this value, I have this value. How can we collaborate to make them work together? But it also, I like to teach in very incremental steps so that people can grab things and run with them and get some quick wins right away. So Sharpen to me is an acronym also on top of that mentality that is selflessly helping already persons eager for nurturing. And so when people are like, what's Sharpen? Well, it's me just selflessly helping already persons eager for nurturing. They're like, what? I'm like, yeah, it's an acronym, right? But it's also, it's like my alter ego. Like, I wake up in the morning and you can see the lines on my forehead. I wear this hat all day long, right? But when I get off of here and I go take my son to this event here in like 10 minutes and I walk out the door, I put on a different hat. I'm a dad now. I've got a different role. And so for me, it's almost like an alter ego. It's a play on who I'm being. We can go through life and do, but if we're not being who we want to be, we're just simply doing. And you can do until you're blue in the face, but if you don't know and you don't be, all you're doing is doing, and you're not actually showing up. You're just walking through the motions. You're being reactionary versus intentional.
That is amazing. I'm gonna have to go back and listen and take notes on all of that. You're seriously quotable.
Oh,
Lots of things to think about. Um, I'm gonna wrap up here. Is there anything else you want to share? I'll put your social media handles and whatnot in the description, but um, you know, what do
yeah.
you want people to know?
At the end of the day, people will believe in you, but you've got to believe in yourself. I mentioned the date earlier, September 28, 2011. The previous like 5.5 years, I had a son that was killed. My wife took her life. And between 2008 and 2010, I drank and snorted away about $120 million in 5 companies and literally lost everything. If I can do it after not having anything, gaining the world and losing it all again and coming back almost 2 times now, excuse me, anybody can do anything as long as you put your mind to it. I'm not the wealthiest guy in the world. I've got a lot of issues myself. I'm human. However, I know, like, when I look out this window, for example, there's a water tower out there. Go find me on social media and watch that story. There's a water tower right outside of my window that 10 years ago, this subdivision wasn't here, and I was sleeping in my car. I was homeless underneath of that water tower, hidden in the trees and the woods that were here where this subdivision is. You fast forward 8 years, and now I own the largest house in the subdivision. I didn't realize that I was in the same area that water tower was until a couple of days in my house. And I look out and I'm like, holy cow, that's where I came from. If I can come from there and sit here, anybody can do anything. So don't beat yourself up. Don't listen to the stories and tapes that are in your head, because all that is just a repetition of what was. Start running a new tape. Start running a new movie in your mind as to what will, and it will be. One of the things that I say often to my son is, if you say you can't, you won't. But if you say you can, you might. And so if you can change just that one little thing, start speaking something different into your life. And remember, we only go through life one of two ways. We're either being intentional or we're going through life reactionary. And my favorite example is an example that I used a couple of years ago. I was on stage in Jamaica with some of the most reputable people in the world when it comes to coaching and speaking. And I had this epiphany. And I said this, Carrie, and I'll say it to you, and maybe you'll get the same answer or response. If your husband said, "Hey, hon, will you run to the store real quick and go get milk and Ritz crackers?" What would you say?
I'd say sure.
Sure. You walk in the door and now role play with me. "Hey, how are you today? Can I help you find anything?"
No, thanks.
Every time, 99 times out of 100, we all have done it. I've done it. I'm well aware of it. We reacted. Guess what? Now, that same person that you just said, "No, thanks," imagine how that made them feel when the previous 872 people went through the front doors and said that. They are now going home, sitting on their bed and contemplating suicide at some point because their job and the people that they're supposed to be serving has made them feel unworthy. So somebody right now watching or listening to this may be feeling that same kind of way. It's because the people and stories that you've told yourself, you've allowed yourself to think differently of who you could be. Versus I walk into the store now and I say, "Man, I need milk. It's in the back, right? It's always in the back, but I don't know where the Ritz crackers are." "Oh, that no big deal. It's in aisle 6 normally, but we're doing stock, so it's over in aisle 13. "Man, fantastic. Those peaches look great." Just imagine if you were to walk in and do that intentionally. How much better would your business be because your attitude? How much better would your relationships be? And that's just an example, but we've all done it. We go into the grocery store. Hell, there's a mega chain of where we all buy wholesale products at very cheap prices based out of Arkansas, right? Like they have a greeter at the door, and if you're really nice, you can get a sticker. Just imagine if you walked in and you told the person hi and ask them how their day was. If you can do that for one life, that one life might change another, but you can also take that same emotion, that response that gives you, and apply that energy into something else, and it will create a momentum. And the more momentum you have, the better force you have driving you, and the energy around you propels you and will attract to you the people and things of the life and world that you desire.
You have so much wisdom. Thank you so much for sharing it. I know you need to go and take your son. So thank you. And we can't wait to learn real estate from you.
Hey, I'm excited. I'm excited that you guys jumped in. And so for anybody watching this, do you mind if I share with them kind of who we are?
Yeah.
So if you guys want a little taste of who I am and what I do, on Facebook, I've got a free group. It's called Virtual Wholesaling 101, Prospecting Objections and Rebuttals. That group, there's no activity in that group. You can just go in and watch free content. There's about a year and a half worth of free training videos of what I do. I literally started the business that I'm in from the backseat of my car, a cell phone that was about to be turned off in 2 or 3 weeks, and a library computer. I didn't have the money to drive around talking to people. I didn't have a license. You do not need a license to be in real estate. You and I could do a deal with the napkin at a Starbucks or one that you found on the ground for all that matters. But I found a loophole, and I have flipped. Most people call it flipping. I have flipped over 6,000 properties in the last 7 years, all on paper. Never swung a hammer, never invested a dime into a property, and have been very, very successful. And so if you want to check that out, you can find me, Bryce McKinley, on Facebook, Coach Sharpen on Instagram, or if you want to learn more about our program, you can go to the number 5, the word hour flip, 5hourflip.com. put in your email, and you'll get a PDF, an 8-step guide to getting started and generating leads so you can start talking to people. And if and only if you're serious about getting started or taking your business to the next level and you want to know more about real estate, you can click the application and go through that process on that second page. So that's how you get a hold of me. I love you, lady. I love your energy. You and your husband are just amazing. Thank you so much for having me on tonight.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. And go have fun with your son.
Appreciate it. Y'all have a great night. God bless.
Bye.
Bye.